Welcome to Google Forms training. During this training, we will cover these topics. We will show you some examples, create a basic form, types of questions you could ask, how to create sections, changing your settings, adjusting preferences and defaults, managing the responses you get, and using Google Forms for the data for further analysis.
Google Forms can be really useful, and we've got some examples that we can show you. So the first one is using surveys or the forms for getting staff to sign to say that they've read them, so great for safeguarding. There's an option for after school clubs and one for residential and for quizzing, so we'll show you those now. So with the form for staff signing off the policies, this is a great one, for example, for the safeguarding in September, getting staff to sign off to say that they've read them. So it's quite just a multiple choice, a yes or a no, and this is what the survey will actually look like. So they'll just put their email address and then click the yes and no and submit, so that you've then got a record of who's read those policies. There is then the after school clubs. Again, you may have other tools that you can already manage doing this, but this is one way of using the forms. So you can add pictures. So we've got an image here of the different clubs that are available. And then we've got some sections in this one. So does your child actually want a club? Yes or no. If they answer no, it just goes to the end of the form. And if it's yes, then here's some other information. So it might be split from which year groups they're in, because obviously some clubs will only be available for some year groups. So if you're in year 7 or 8, here's some choices you've got. And this particular one is a multiple choice grid. So it's got the different activities and what their preference is. And we can go down. It might be that some clubs are specific to gender. So if it's girls football, for example, you can split it. Obviously, this one is then split out for year 9 and 10. And again, the clubs may be different. And then I've just got the example here to show you what that looks like. So does your child want to attend the club? Yes. And then you go on to answer further questions that, yes, they're in year 7. And on we go as to what their choices are. And the next example we have is an example for just getting some feedback from parents, whether or not they'd be interested. So this one was for a year 6 residential. So it's not saying that whether you're going to go or not, because you may have other payment systems that you're using. This is just to get their indication of, we're thinking about, looking into this. Would your child be interested in actually attending or not? The final option is quizzes. Great classroom example, just gives you a chance to see what the children's understanding is of the topic you may have just been teaching.
To find out, give them a quick quiz, find out their understanding. Again, here's the edit version, and here's the one for them to fill in, so they can just tick the boxes as they think is appropriate. Creating a basic form. Let's see how you create a form. From your drive, use the waffle up the top right, click on Forms, and you'll want a blank form. You could use one of the templates it offers, but we'll start with a blank one. Pop your title in here, change the description. If you click up here, it actually offers you the title you've given as the name of the document. You can put a question and give some answers, and you can see it even offers you sometimes some suggestions. So yeah, we'll have those as an option, or you can go, actually I want an additional option there. You can add extra questions. You can duplicate questions using the duplicate option at the bottom of the question. You can import questions from other forms that you've already used. So that's really useful if you've got forms that you want to redo. So select your form, and it offers you can import just one, or more than one if you've got more than one question in the form, or you can select all. And then you choose import questions, and it imports the question for you. To move questions around, you click the dots at the top of the question and drag it up and pop it where you want it to belong. You can also add videos, or you can add images from your drive. If you click on it, you can resize it as well. If you wanted images attached to your questions, you can do that too. And you can add videos as well. So you can have a little look, search YouTube for whatever the video is that you want. Once you've found the one you want, then you can import that as well. Okay, but you can see that one's come up as a separate question. Now we're going to look at the different kinds of questions you could ask. So if we go back to our form that we created earlier, create a new question. Okay, if we click that box there, you can see we have lots of different options. So first option is short answers, and then they would be able to put in their name as the answer. There is also the option for a longer answer. Another question, this time we've got multiple choice. Now we saw that earlier, that's where you get the roundel and for people to select their answers. So this is a single answer option where you can give multiple choice options, but you can also remove. You've got multiple choice options, but only one of them is able to be selected. Check boxes option is where you have more than one option to tick, so you can tick multiple choices. And drop down, if you've got a longer list of things, you would have a drop down menu. So if I were to go and have a look at this now through the link to view it, so there's your short answer, your long answer, the multiple choice where you can only select one, the tick boxes where you can select more, and the drop down where you can select what you want. Okay, so we've looked at these first 5. Now we're going to look at these other 3 options. These are a bit more complicated, so I've pre-prepared some forms of these. So first, the linear scale. Here you can select where you want the scale to go to and from, and what you want the options to be, and you can type in those. Once you finish those, the form looks like this, so the user can select their understanding, for example, in classroom. Next, the multiple choice grid. This is a grid of options as rows and then a single choice columns. Here we've used a pre-selection of what the kids want to do as their options for GCSE, and that form would end up looking like this, so that children can select how interested they are. You can see this one is giving a warning that requires a response per row, and that's because I've selected require a response in each row here. If I turn that off, then that warning would not appear. And obviously you can use this to say, why is nobody wanting to take geography? Everyone wanting to take history. You can also use it in a primary school classroom with some images, set up your rows and columns, and select the correct word. And again, it's a single choice. They can't select more than one thing that is the train. Moving on now to the tick box grid, that allows users to select more than one column per row. So here we've created one for parents to say why they would, what sorts of times are the best times to contact them about their child. So you can see here, they can select multiple options. You could do the same with uniforms. So if you're trying to convince them to order some uniform, you may have better ways to order uniform, but this is an option. So I have more than one child, and actually, yes, I do need more uniform because I need an extra jumper for one of them. And you can see there I added an extra section. We'll come back to sections later, and then I can add the section. Or for something, a performance, for example, for choir performance, trying to work out what sort of costume, what sort of outfits we want everyone to wear. So you want to see what sorts of things they've got available. And there are your options. Now we're going to look at using sections. So creating sections, moving to sections based on the answers, and creating additional conditions. So here we've got our previous form. So if you're in the last question of the form so far and you click Add Section, it just creates another section below to which you can add questions. And as you can see here, it just says after section 1, continue to the next section. You might use that, for example, if you've got a particularly long form, you want to break it down for people. If you realise, actually, I want these to be in a section of their own, if you click in the question above them, and click Add Section, you can see now what would you like to eat and what is 2 plus 2 is now in a separate section, and this section that was section 2 is now section 3. If you want people to move to different sections based on their answers, you can click in these dots at the bottom right of the question and go to section based on answer. So instead of continuing to the next section, you might want some of them to specifically jump ahead or go back to an earlier section or just submit it. It's up to you. Do be careful though of deleting things, because if you just delete the section, it will delete any questions that are in that section as well. Now at the moment this just has an empty question, but if I delete the section, it deletes all the questions as well. If you realise you've created a section that you don't want to do, you can either move the questions as I showed you earlier by clicking on the dots at the top of the question, or click on the dots at the top of the section and merge with above, and it joins them back together again. Now we're going to look at some of the options that you have within the settings for your form. We'll go back to the form we had before, and back up at the top you have the cog with your settings. So this top option allows you to collect email addresses. Okay, so that would be, for example, if you're wanting to know which of your students has filled in the form. Okay, be careful though, they have to have a Gmail account, so don't use this when you're trying to collect information from parents. Just ask them to give you their email address. You can also restrict the users only to TKAT, so that again restrict it to your students, or to try to restrict it to your students, and also if you're restricting it for signing in, making them only do one response each. Then you've got the option if they want them to edit after submission. If you want them to submit more than once, obviously give that a tick so they can submit it again. And again, you can change your response. Over in quizzes, you can make it a quiz, so you can give the questions point values and auto grade it, at least potentially in part, which would save you a bit of work for homework and things. If you've made it a quiz, you can, whilst they're on Chromebooks, you can make it so they can't open elsewhere. Of course, if they're not using a Chromebook, that doesn't stop them. to look up the answers. You can tell them the mark immediately when they submit or later after you've checked it. And they can see whether they've missed any questions, what they got right, and the point values if you've ticked those answers. Okay, over here, instead of using the settings cog, if you use the more dots, you can see you can add collaborators. So that's to add other people to work on the form with you. So for example, if you're working on the form in a department, you can add that. That's just the same as when you're adding elsewhere. So you can look up the person you're wanting to add. You can choose to notify them. Most of the time we would want to do that. Okay, or you can copy the link for them to look at. You can also create a pre-filled form, which obviously if you're going to do it as homework you wouldn't, but you might want to give an option on some of the options. You might want to put some information in to start you off, and that's how you would do that. You can tick it off, fill it in here, and then they can choose which they want, and then they would be able to see what you've already filled in. So preferences and defaults, how you can select it so that it will do these items by default rather than having to select it each time. We'll go back to our form, go to the more dots at the top, scroll down to preferences, click preferences, and you can choose to collect email addresses, which would collect the email addresses. Remember, they need a Gmail address for this. You can make the questions required. So your default would be to have all questions have to be filled in, and then you can deselect that. So it depends on how you want to write your forms. Sometimes you'll want questions most of the time filled in, or most of the time not filled in. So that will depend on whether if you want them mostly always filled in, you want ticked, and if you want people to choose whether to fill them in or not, you want it unticked. You can change that question by question, but this is just to do so that you've got the bulk of your questions will have this. And then again, you can get a default quiz point value, and you can set my default quiz point 1 point per question, or 10 points per question, or whatever you want. You can use the up and down arrows, or you can type. Also up at the top here, we have the option to customize our theme. So you'll have noticed some of the forms that we've been using are in different colors and things. So this is where you can change that. And as you can see, you can change the theme, you can change the background color, you can even change the font style. I would probably stay away from decorative and formal and just stick to either basic or playful, depending on the age group you're aiming for in terms of readability. The other thing is preview. So that's what the eye there allows you to see what your users will see.
Once you have finished creating your form, you'll then need to send your form. So this will show you how to do that. So you can send via an email. You can include the survey actually in the email, copy the link, or embed. So I'll show you how to do that. So within your form, you can click on the send button over here, and you have the options as detailed before. So you have the email, so you can put the information in here. It just says I've invited you to fill in a form, whatever you want it to be. You can include the form within the email, so it will show you here's the text, and actually they'll answer all the questions within the email. That's an option. You can just click that there. You had the option here, depending on what your preferences are, to collect email addresses. But again, obviously that will only work for those that are using Gmail, because you will need to log in to view this form. Obviously, if you unclick that, it won't collect the email addresses, and anyone, so parents, for example, will be able to fill the form in for you. You also have the option here for your link. So if you want to put that onto your website or into a parent's communication, you have that option there. And usually would suggest you use the shortened URL, and it just means that you've got a much shorter link to send. Obviously, it's exactly the same link. And the final option here is to embed. So if you wanted to embed the HTML, you've got the full link there for you to be able to copy and paste. Now we'll look at viewing responses. So if you see the section up here, you have the responses. You can click on there. And at the moment, this one's turned off. So you can actually say, right, I have all my responses I want. So you can turn that off at any time. Unfortunately, there isn't a facility to be able to have it that after so many responses or turn it off at a particular time or day, you have to manually do that. So you click, once you've got some responses, you can click on Create Spreadsheet here. It will create a new spreadsheet, or you may have one that you're already using. So we'll just create a new one for now. And that will then create a Google Sheet with you with each of the questions that you have, and obviously you'll get all the entries in there. It will also give you a date stamp, so if you're doing a first come first serve for something, you can see the exact times that entries have come in. I now have this example where we've already submitted this survey, and I now have, you can see here, 167 responses. So if I click on here, it will show me what the responses are. So 46% said no and 53% said yes. It's split, so if I just go down to this one, we said how many primary school children do you have, and then this is the split for how many they had. So it's not just a yes or no, whatever the questions you had, that's how they'll split the responses. And here I asked information about how many devices that they have, and then it's they split down here as to the different types that I have. Obviously I've got quite a few options. So now I'm going to look at, we've got one particular example that I can show you, which was something that they used at Bewbush. I've amended it slightly, but it will give you an idea of how you can actually use your Google form data and actually further analyse what information you're receiving. So this is the document that we use. As I said, I've adapted slightly. So all of this information is what came through actually on the form. And then we went on, we had a number of devices that we were handing out in different phases. So then I've got all of this information over here as to the different times and dates that they were collecting, how many we had, the devices that we had, etc. So you can use this initial information for just that beginning part of your form, and then you can go on to further analyse that as you need to with additional columns, etc. So that's the end of the training. I hope you all found it useful.